Hey guys, it's me, Cyrus. Welcome back. Well, you know what this is. Everyone knows what this is, right? This is one of those Nintendo Entertainment Systems. Or as my dad used to refer to this, the Nintendo. This was the console that we all know pretty much saved gaming, right? After the big crash and everything sort of fell apart, Nintendo was able to put together a video game system that people would actually buy, and that had games that were a little bit more advanced than what had come before. So pretty much everybody that wanted to play a video game bought this thing, and that was a lot. There was a lot of NESs sold. In Japan, this thing was called the Famicom, and in America, in North America, this was called the Nintendo Entertainment System. You could get different models that came with the gun. The first set of guns were gray, the second guns were orange. So there was different types of guns. There was a robot called Rob the Robot. Strange little robot. Had a couple of games that would work with the robot, but that was kind of a gimmick. The D-pad for the NES controller is legendary. It's very well known. It's a very established form of control and has been emulated by other companies on different types of devices for many, many years up until today. I mean, it's still copied in a lot of ways even now. The NES was not the most powerful hardware in the world, but it did benefit from having an architecture that they could work around some of those limitations with extra chips in the cartridges and things like that. The cartridges were pretty big for the NES. If you've never seen one, this is what they look like. By the way, this is a repro. Don't worry, this is not the real thing. This is a very expensive cartridge if it was the real thing, but it's not. This is how big the cartridges are. They're pretty good sized. Considerably bigger, about twice as big as a Mega Drive Genesis cartridge. Considerably bigger than a Master System cartridge. They're very large. And this was all by design. What's really interesting is the cartridge itself contains mostly air. The actual game is only about this much of the actual cartridge, just that, not that much. So they're able to actually, you know, the cartridges could have been a lot smaller. In Japan, they actually were a lot smaller, which is sort of what I want to get to, the point of this video. I've had this NES for quite a while. This is not my original NES, but this is one that I've had for quite a while since I started recollecting retro stuff. And I play the NES pretty regularly. It's still, I mean, come on, it's the NES. How are you not going to play this thing? It's super fun. Most people have either the NES Classic at this point, or they use emulation to play NES games. And some people like me actually do play the original hardware and enjoy it quite a bit. Well, recently, a friend of mine decided to send me some things. He sent me some stuff just as gifts, just, you know, for what, you know, friends send each other things. I sent him some stuff, he sent me some stuff, yada yada yada. But he sent me some interesting things that I wanted to share with you, and it's relevant to this. Here's a couple of things that he sent me, and these are Famicom cartridges. These are the Japanese variant of this. These cartridges contain the same board, basically. This is the Japanese version of Super Mario Brothers, for example. So you can see that the board itself is going to be pretty small for these cartridges. And, you know, they didn't have to be really big. I think Nintendo wanted them to be bigger for the North American market, just because they felt like it was more appealing to Americans, I guess. I don't know. We always thought these were really clunky and humongous, So I think we would have really appreciated a smaller cartridge, but you know, these are still cool. I'm not saying they're not cool. It just was pretty shocking when we finally got our hands on a Genesis or a Master System and saw how much smaller those cartridges were. But yeah, so he sent me a couple of these Famicom carts, and I didn't actually own a Famicom. I actually never owned a Famicom. I've owned several different Nintendo Entertainment Systems, never had a Famicom, but I've always thought about getting a particular model of Famicom. There are different models of the Famicom that you could buy if you're interested in doing that. There's, you know, the original Famicom model, and it looks kind of, to me, strange. I never found it particularly appealing. I know some people do. Some people really appreciate that aesthetic, but it wasn't really something I was interested in. But there was one that I was very interested in, and not just because of how it looks, but also because of its functionality. So I want to share with you something that I have recently acquired, and it's all because my buddy sent me these cartridges and really got me to thinking about this all over again and deciding to go ahead and try this and get this thing that I had thought about for many, many years. So let's take a look at what I'm talking about. Okay, so this right here is the Sharp Twin Famicom. Yeah, it is a couple of things in one. It's a very unique console. These were only released in Japan. They were put out by the company Sharp. Nintendo had a really interesting arrangement with them where they put out certain products like TVs that had built-in Famicoms, and they put out things like this, which is an all-in-one solution for the Famicom and the Famicom disk system. If you're not familiar with the Famicom disk system, I'll just tell you, yeah, they put out games on floppy disks. This is what those floppy disks look like. They're very unique. They're a little bit smaller than what you might consider a regular 3.5-inch floppy disk for like a PC or something like that. These discs are two-sided. They have a side A and a side B, as you can see. All of the games that I have that are on discs use both of those sides. You actually start your game on A. It's like where the boot part of the game is, and then the actual rest of the game is on side B. And the games that I've been tinkering around with where you can save your game, like for example Bubble Bobble, you save it on side A. So you actually write your save games onto the discs, believe it or not. It's pretty fascinating. These discs have a very interesting history in Japan. They used to have these kiosks set up where people could go write games onto actual floppy disks. The problem is Nintendo had a lot of piracy with this format, and it wasn't as reliable as the cartridges, so they ended up moving away from these. The appeal of this format was that it could save a lot more data than what they originally could on a cartridge. They eventually figured out how to get a lot more data on those cartridges, or at least they decided they could figure that out. So the cartridges got bigger, and they just stuck with that going forward with the Famicom. But the discs are very interesting. It's a fun, unique experience as far as playing these games. There's games that were exclusively released on those discs, and so it's really nice to have a disk drive to be able to play that stuff. The Famicom, the Twin Famicom here, has built-in controllers. They're hardwired into the system, and these wires are about, I guess, about 3 feet long. This particular model is one of the later release. There are different models of the Twin Famicom. This is an AN505, and the reason that I picked up one of the later model ones, and the reason I recommend that you do too if you're wanting to get one of these, is because these are the newer ones, so they're probably gonna have, I don't know, it's possible these will be in the best shape, but also because these have turbo on the controllers, and some of the earlier models do not have turbo. And since these are wired into the system, you kind of want to get as good a controller as you can. Pretty unique. You get two controllers. This one, the second player controller, doesn't have selector start, but it does have a microphone. And this is the microphone slider for the volume control to pick up on that microphone. I'll tell you, this is really fascinating, because if you ever plug this thing in and you're trying to record footage from it or something, you notice you're getting like a strange amount of like background noise or hum or some weird thing going on, try to slide this all the way down and turn it off, because it might be on, because that microphone does constantly just pick up noise, believe it or not. But yeah, so you get these two controllers. Also, it's worth noting that there are a couple of ports on the side of the console itself over here, and this is your port for your light gun and different things like that. This is another port that, if you slide this little thing open here, you see this port here, and that's actually if you want to connect external devices. Like I think you can connect a different disk drive, things like that. Not really very useful, but just kind of explaining what these ports are. So yeah, nothing on this side. Over here, the bottom is pretty much just barren, not a lot going on over there. And on the back you have power. Be really careful what power you use, because if you use the wrong power you can fry this thing. It does not use the standard Famicom power supply, so be aware of that. Video and audio output, and another expansion interface here, which I'm actually not 100% sure what this thing does. If you put cartridges in this thing, you have to have this slid to the right position, because if you have it up like this, you're not going to be able to get your cartridges in. You need to have it slid up like that to play the discs. So slide that down, you can put your cartridge in like that, then you can play your game. And it has an eject button here, which is a pretty strong eject button. If you hit it like pretty good, you can knock that cartridge all the way out. That's pretty fun. Make sure you get, if you decide to buy one of these, make sure you get one that has a serviced belt for the disk drive, because the belts over time do degrade. So make sure you have a new belt in your console. But overall, I've been very happy with this thing. It puts out a really good signal. Why did I want this? Well, like I said, it's cool to have both formats available on it. Also, if you get a Famicom, then you can take advantage of the extra sound channels that are offered for certain games like Castlevania 3. So there are reasons to get a Famicom if you want one. The only downside is light gun, kind of expensive. So if you want to get a light gun for this thing, they have a really cool light gun that actually looks like an Old West revolver, but pretty pricey. So yeah, that's the only real downside there as far as that goes. But pretty cool console. I actually really like it. Let's take a look at some footage that I captured. This is not modified, so all the footage you see is going to be just composite. Let's take a look at some of the games running on this thing, see how these discs work, and see what I got sent from my good buddy. So let's check it out.
Okay.